Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to this episode of Generate Now, the Microsoft podcast, where you will hear about customer and partner successes in Azure OpenAI, ChatGPT, and Copilots. My name is James Caton, and today we have a wonderful conversation with Wipro about a recent deployment of Azure OpenAI at a major North American airport. To get a sneak peek at the future of air travel, listen on. Don't forget to hit like or subscribe on your favorite podcast app and share this show with a friend, a colleague, or a customer. And now on to the show. Hello, Swapnil. How are you today?
Hey, hi, James. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing very well, very well. Thank you for joining us today on the podcast. I appreciate the time. We have a wonderful discussion today on some generative AI work that you are doing. Could you give us a brief introduction of yourself and your organization, and we can then get into our discussion on the great work that you are doing with Azure OpenAI.
Sure. Really excited, and thanks for having me in this podcast, James. I'm Swapnil Belhe. I head the Wipro's Generative AI Center of Excellence, part of AI Solutions practice. I'm also the chief AI architect of various AI-based solutions and accelerators that Wipro is developing. I actually started my career in machine learning and developing NLP and vision-based solutions. And then, continuing that, flow, getting into the edge AI, speech AI, and now heading the generative AI. I'm also very much, passionate about AI that is applied to 3D data, and that is a new area that that I'm working on.
Excellent. So you started off with NLP back in the day, and the world is just now catching up with what you started doing many years ago. Congratulations.
Long way to go still.
Swapnil, you and your team and your company have done some really incredible work with Azure OpenAI, and we'd like to hear a little bit about the work that you're doing, the repeatable assets that you've built, and a customer implementation, a customer story. So, could you give us a brief summary of the asset itself? WEGA, W-E-G-A from Wipro. What is it? What does it do? And then what can we look forward to doing? What can customers look forward to doing with a solution like that?
Well, absolutely. And it's an interesting topic. I mean, the way we started implementing WEGA, it all came from the challenges that customers were facing with respect to the generative AI. As you know, I mean, there is a tremendous excitement about generative AI in the industry. While AI is not new, companies are just, beginning to realize the transformative abilities that AI has to offer when we combine the human ingenuity with AI-powered technology. So Wipro AI 360 is helping enterprises capitalize on the true value of AI with AI infused into every part of the ecosystem. So everyone is exploring the possibilities of using generative AI for a variety of use cases. So some of the use cases that I'm seeing in the market are around, enterprise knowledge search. These are very popular one. I mean, every customer is asking us to build an enterprise knowledge search or build a question and answering system, either for the internal employees or, for their own customers. And then the use cases around call center transformations, where generative AI is expected to play a major role. So I'll talk about some of these use cases, how we are implementing it. And while talking about those use cases, this important, accelerator that we have developed recently, we call it as a WEGA. WEGA stands for Wipro Enterprise Generative AI Accelerator. It's basically a suite of multiple modules combined together to address variety of generative AI problems. So we'll talk about that as well as we move along.
Excellent. Swapnil, let's talk about a customer. There's a number of implementations of Wega. The customer that you have in mind today, what problem were they trying to solve for themselves when they came to you and you proposed to them the Wega suite?
Absolutely. This is for a major airport hub in North America. Wipro AI 360, has built an Azure OpenAI-based passenger experience assistant for them. Although there was a digital assistant guiding passengers when they visited the airport's website, that digital assistant was built using traditional menu-driven, FAQ-based, chatbot, and couldn't address the queries that effectively. So hence, for most queries, users would call a live agent rather than, relying on the FAQ chatbot, right? For instance, if I'm dropping off my family at the terminal and waiting for maybe 20 minutes or so, what are the parking charges for me? Because I'm just waiting for 20 minutes there at the airport. Or things, could be like, can I get my car washed at the terminal while I'm waiting there? These are the queries that customers had in mind or passengers had in mind when they wanted to visit the terminal. We also saw things like, hey, I'm running late for my flight XYZ, and what's the latest boarding time for that flight? And things like, and then there were tons of queries around, the food options, or, what kind of foods and animals I can take in and out of the airport, because there are a lot of restrictions and guidelines around that. So every time such queries were there, customers or passengers used to call the airport live agent, and the chatbot that was there on their website had basically not helping them a lot. And that's where we thought of, customer wanted to see how generative AI can help drive this transformation. Can we remove this traditional chatbot and bring in the generative AI-based chatbot to directly answer some of these customer questions?
So Swapnil, the challenge with an FAQ is you have to already know what the questions are going to be that you're being asked. So in many ways, it's kind of a prescriptive project, because you have to know the top 20 or top 50 questions, and then form an answer for those and surface those to your users. The advantage or the differentiation with generative AI is that you give it access to a corpus of data at an organization, in this case, an airport. And it looks like what you've done is you've given it access to a very wide corpus of data that spans many multiple verticals. So, for example, I never would have thought about asking an airport if I could get my car washed, but it looks like that might be an option at that airport. And that certainly wouldn't be, a top 50 FAQ question at most airports. So, it looks like you've really expanded the access to data at this particular airport.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And in fact, many of the customers were not even aware that such, facilities at the airport are actually available, because they have to, navigate through multiple pages to actually access this kind of information. While person could be sitting at the parking lot asking, trying to figure it out, can I get my car washed? And there it is. I mean, if you just have the AI assistant there, just answering those questions, that would be, really beneficial for the airport.
Is this also a scenario, Swapnil, where someone asks a question, for example, what are the parking fees? And the chatbot answers the question, and then it surfaces additional tips. For example, how much is the parking fee for a 3-hour parking short term? And the chatbot will tell you it's $20 an hour, total of $60. And oh, by the way, we can also wash your car. Is this part of the scenario? Because it looks like an upsell opportunity, a next best action to increase revenue at the airport. It sounds like an opportunity for improved customer service because you're providing additional amenities to customers. So in some ways, if you have that flexibility, if you're able to do that, it sounds like an opportunity really to improve service and improve revenue at an organization that quite often doesn't have a good reputation for, airports don't have a good reputation for customer service in general.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that's a very good question, James. Yes, absolutely. When we actually gave the response of what are the parking charges, we also looked at other, aspects around it. It could be car wash services. It could be, meet and greet services at the airport. And all of this was, also listed down. So user can choose those services as well. Another example is around the restaurants at the airport. So we looked at, user asking a query like, hey, are there any vegan restaurants after the security at Terminal 1? And it will give the list of restaurants. Not only that, it started giving a specific menus or the cuisine that is available at those restaurants. So if I'm looking at a burger, it will give me the facilities where I can get the vegan burger at multiple places. And if the rates or the cost of the burger is also available on the respective website, it'll actually give you this particular burger is cheaper at this particular restaurant after at Terminal 1. So that was kind of really useful for the end users.
Awesome. So as someone that started off in natural language processing at the beginning of your career, it must be really satisfying to see industry and technology catch up with where you wanted to start your career.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is sometimes it is worrying because the way the NLP is going or the way the generative AI is answering questions, I would have spent years and years to get the answers to this question, writing those NLP logics, but now it's complete understanding of the sentence. That's really, really good to see.
Excellent. So tell us about the project. How did the customer prepare for the project? How did you help them prepare? Were there any challenges, any specific challenges that you'd like to highlight for people that are listening as they think about potentially starting a similar project, things that they should consider as well?
Sure. So there were plenty of challenges. So when we started, we thought, it's going to be a quick project because it's just the data from their website that we need to ingest as a knowledge source and then create a Q&A chatbot around it. But as it turned out, as we move along in the project, I mean, there were many, many challenges. And now what has happened, the way we are able to deal with those challenges, now we are replicating that across the organization. And what helped us is we were the early adopters of Azure OpenAI, and we also had Vega accelerators on Azure Marketplace earlier. In fact, we were the first SI partners to have OpenAI-based offering on the marketplace. So our experience with generative AI, our accelerators, and our adaptive strategy with OpenAI APIs really helped us in successfully delivering the expected results very quickly. In this particular case, the biggest business challenge was the data complexity, right? Although data availability and safety were also the challenges, but data complexity was the biggest one. So we analyzed the data and kind of divided into 3 categories or 3 buckets. And that really helped us to align the appropriate OpenAI APIs and the prompts to these data categories. So I'll give an example. One data category was a completely unstructured, text or data, which is often found on the websites. There were documents. There were complex layouts like tables, headers, images, etc. So this was one category. Another category was the structured data, which is lying in the databases. Right. And the third category was the real-time information APIs, right? For instance, the flight information, etc. So we had these combination of data sources coming in, and we had to actually build the OpenAI-based, generative AI-based solution to create the passenger experience. So at one point, you need some kind of a mechanism to understand what query is, and from where I would get an answer from, right? It could be one of these data sources where your answer could be lying. So the Vega...
Or multiple of those data sources that you have to rationalize.
Oh, absolutely. So what happens is you need to build, the kind of intelligent query router. And that's what Vega, one of the module of the Vega is that. But the complexity of the data was not just limited to these kind of data layouts and things like that. We also had this particular website was dynamically changing 4 to 5 times a day with no fixed schedule of when it will change. So suddenly some of the pages will change. And the customer wanted those changes to reflect in the answers that the chatbot was giving. And what added to this complexity was, this was not just the English language. We also wanted to, add one more language into it. So it's kind of like a bilingual chatbot, which can, take data from multiple language sources, infuse them into the knowledge store, and then, the query back in those particular languages.
So the questions were in multiple languages. And what about the data sources? Were they in multiple languages as well that you had to? So someone could ask a question in English, and the source data could be in a different language, and you would have to query the data in that language, bring it back, interpret it back into the language of the person asking the question, and then present it in that language.
So the way we did it was, the data was there. The data sources were different for both the languages. So we kind of created different knowledge, stores, and basically a particular language, query was hitting that knowledge store of that language. So kind of simplified the way we can handle these languages. But as an attempt, we tried to do, you ask a query in another language, hit another language knowledge store and see what happens. But the challenge with that was, how do we test this, whether the generated answer is correct or not? The whole translation aspect of it had to be tested thoroughly. And that's where, we thought, and the customer thought in this case was, let's keep the two language sources separate, and let's just ask query in those specific languages.
Okay.
So there's one more challenge that I would like to highlight. I think, it's not just about how do we, look at multiple data sources, different languages, but also, they had, a need to detect inappropriate language used in the queries, and also wanted us to remove any responses that do not adhere to the airport policies. Now, it may look like a standard approach. Every customer would have that. But in this case, the inappropriate language also means it could be, user is asking about bringing some hazardous material in his bag, and that's a possible terrorism threat. And that has to be logged separately, and the agent has to be notified immediately if that kind of a discussion is going on with the, with the user. So that added another layer of complexities in detecting the inappropriate languages.
So your team had to build an additional responsible AI or content safety layer above and beyond what comes with Azure OpenAI, because you had a very specific safety-minded customer.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So what we did is, in this particular case, we used the Azure standard OpenAI component, including the responsible AI guidelines and frameworks, but then had to really, infuse these kind of additional guardrails into the queries. So the way we were doing the query handling at that stage, we added some additional AI layer to detect the changes in the language and specific keywords that the customer was looking for. So something like a weed or something like, marijuana and things like that, they wanted explicitly to be called out and stored in the database.
Okay, interesting.
Mm-hmm. So initially, when we started this project, actually, when we tried Azure OpenAI GPT models on a small subset of the data, and we showed it to customer. That's how we started this, right? The results were absolutely amazing, like you mentioned. I mean, whoever looks at the results for the first time, I think they're great, right? Customer really liked the natural language queries and the responses, unlike the earlier FAQ chatbot that the customer was used to. So later on, we mutually decided to expand the data set and test again, right? At this point, we noticed that the models were beginning to hallucinate because now the data is larger, and it tend to have a less accuracy, right? The responses were less accurate. So customer was trying to see how we can improve the accuracy and reduce the hallucinations. We immediately figured that this was due to the way the data is stored in the vector store. And, there was a need to, some sort of intelligent query routing that I just discussed. So these two were the important aspect. How do we store the data in the vector store? And secondly, how do we route these queries across multiple data sources? So for vector database, the typical data chunking strategies that we see around, even in the, there are multiple open source libraries doing the data chunking and putting that data into the vector store. We kind of looked at those. In all of those scenarios, we found that these chunking strategies were disregarding the original contents, right? So we decided to bring in the Wipro, Vega generative AI-based accelerator called as Vega Chunker.
So Swapnil, if I could ask a question. So what does that mean, disregarding the original content?
Good question. So I'll give an example. What if the input data contains a table, all right? Or what if the input data contains a header and then multiple paragraphs of information that is aligned to that header? Now, what the typical chunking strategies do, they will try to break the input data into fixed size chunks. And those fixed size chunks are the ones that are getting sent to the LLM for responding back as a context, right? And that's where you will find the typical LLMs will give you an answer, but oftentimes the answer is partially correct, or many a times it will try to hallucinate because the RAG pipeline will not get to the right chunks to be sent to the LLM. So it's a combination of the search strategies, the accuracies of the RAG search, and then the way we are storing the data inside. So we kind of created a complete RAG pipeline with respect to the search and the and the way we store the data in those things. So
let me try to understand that a little bit better, Swapnil. So if you have a table, for example, and if it's 500 rows in the table, does that mean that that on occasion the chunking strategy might split the table, and you might have, 200 rows in one chunk and 300 in another chunk, and that might create some of the hallucinations, some of the problems, some of the inaccurate responses. Is that the scenario, or is it different from that?
That is one of the scenarios. So oftentimes you'll find the tables have certain headers, and then the rows are associated with those headers, right? That association of the rows and the headers is not maintained. So even if you use the Azure's, the layout analysis APIs, even then there is a lack of, at some cases, there is a lack of that association with the header information. So as the row, and the rows are not like, they're not single line, right? So we have multiple lines appearing in those rows. We need to associate every row with the header, and that association, we call it in Chunker, we call it as data flattening or table flattening. And we use that to basically create an association with the header and the rows and kind of put it in a language that is well understood by the LLM. So that flattened table is well understood by the LLM and provides a much more natural response with it.
Excellent. Thank you.
Sure. So we got this Vega chunker in, which kind of analyzed the input data in a different way and then stored it into the logical chunks. This, what we found was after this, it tremendously reduced the kind of hallucination that we were seeing. The answers started becoming more sensible on the complex queries because now all your data is well aligned with the document headers. There is a hierarchy of the document that we also maintained in our chunks. So all the metadata that is extracted, we basically align it, with different chunks, right? So all of that added to the overall, the accuracy of the LLM. Secondly, the another module around intelligent query routing, we built an Azure OpenAI GPT-based routing mechanism, which detected the type of query and routed to the correct workflow. I'll give an example. If someone asks about, hey, I am, we just looked at this example. Hey, I'm a vegan, I'm looking for a vegan restaurant, for instance, and where can I find it? And this query will go through a typical knowledge retrieval augmented generation, or the RAG in this case, which is augmented by Vega. But if someone asks about what is the latest get number for my flight XYZ, and this will get to the flight APIs, right? The real-time flight APIs. So kind of routing between these knowledge sources is where the query routing really helped. So I think we're still not out of the woods, even if we implemented these two modules, right? One of the dilemma was, how do we ensure safe responses and also detect the inappropriate queries, right? So that's where I mentioned about we using the Azure AI safety guardrails and then basically augmenting with this additional data. Now that the AI assistant was completely built with the safety guardrails, routing, etc., how do we basically go about testing this? This was another challenge, right? Because the customer wanted us to thoroughly check the passenger assistant on wide variety of test queries. So they were not really willing to roll out into production unless otherwise we do rigorous testing of this. This is unlike any other work that the testing teams are, experienced to do, because this requires a lot of, creative minds to create those test cases, right? And generating those test queries. So thousands of test queries, how do we generate on multiple languages? And this.
So in many ways, it's like a red team in cybersecurity, right? You're going on offense and pretending to be the other team in testing your platform.
Yes, absolutely. And this was by far the biggest challenge because not only the customer was willing to put it into production, but at the same time, many of the testing teams were not aware how do we test this solution, because they were looking at generative AI for the first time, right? And this is where our another module in the Vega suite of module comes into picture. In fact, it is not one module, but it's a combination of couple of modules. One, we call it as Vega Data Builder, and another is Vega Quality Analyzer, right? Basically, Data Builder uses OpenAI GPT-4 model to synthetically generate queries from some of the seed queries that it does, right? It does a very good job at that. With the click of a button, with some seed queries, you can get thousands of queries generated. So there are certain mutation prompts that we apply and then generate this. On the other hand, once you have the data, you've gone through the entire model, you got the output. How do we do the testing of this data? Doing the manual testing is not always a good option because you're changing the versions, you're changing the code, and with every change, you have to keep on testing the outcome. And this is where the Vega Quality Analyzer comes into picture, where again we used the OpenAI GPT-4 model, but in this case we used it as a judge and to rank the chatbot output. And this really helped, fast track the testing cycle, if you will. We also used crowdsourcing model to generate some of the seed queries initially, because some of the members of our team might not be well versed with the other language. They were very good at English, but they were not good in the other language. So why not get the help of the crowdsource to just generate the queries? So we did that as well. It was quite interesting from that angle end to end.
So this is a learning experience for you and for your team, as it is for the rest of the industry, because this is a new technology that everyone is trying to deploy and mature for customers. Any advice from you to organizations that are considering deploying generative AI for their enterprise, for a customer-facing, like an airport, for a customer-facing scenario? How should they think about starting? How should they think about where to start in their organization with a project like this?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. Actually, and this is coming from the experience of implementing this, not just for this particular airport, but across multiple other customers. So the way we started, we initially built a small proof of concept for the customer on a small subset of data. That gave quite a good view of where the things are working and where the things were failing. Right. So I would recommend starting with a small subset of data, get a hang of where it will fail. And those failure cases are the guiding, force to build and scale the system subsequently. The data always is a priority in terms of, trying to create a test queries like we created. But we created those test queries later on in the project. But for the customers looking to do this and fast track this, we would rather suggest them to do this test data creation, query creation right at the start. So you're basically ready with all the test cases. Also look at the safety aspects of your organization, what you're comfortable, what kind of data can be shared onto the public domain. Although the data may be already existing on your website, on the customer-facing side, but still, because it is a natural language, based interaction that's happening between the two parties, it's always best to, double check what kind of data is you're okay to send it to the customers. So these are the two important aspects, and basically dividing your projects into a couple of phases definitely helps.
So Swapnil, as customers look at their data in their systems, right? To your point, when we started this conversation, there was real-time data, there was unstructured data, there was structured data in tables. As customers look at their data estate, are there places where generative AI is easier to start, for lack of a better word? If I was going to start with a use case, is there a certain type of data that I should focus on first to show the value of the solution for a quicker deployment, and then scale into other types of data that might be a little more complex, or is all data really the same? And it doesn't really matter where you start with what kind of data sets.
So the kind of data, it doesn't really matter is what we observe, because now my team is already working on hundreds of such projects across the customers. And now what I realized is that, the kind of data doesn't really matter, but what matters is, what is the sense that you have gathered, or what kind of analysis you have gathered from the data in order to start the project. So I've often found the customers looking at unstructured data. They may not know what's there in that data and what kind of structure, the layouts that it has, and what kind of queries are expected. So basically, they will have to match the simplified queries with the data. So that's how they should start, and vice versa. So with the unstructured and the structured data both.
So what I think I heard is that what kind of data you use to start doesn't matter so much. You can start anywhere, but what's important is understanding the data that you're starting with. That's what I think I heard.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the right approach. Understanding the data, analyzing the data well, and understanding the customer queries that they are going to ask is very important. Once you have these three, I think it doesn't matter whether it's structured data or unstructured data. You can always write connectors to connect to any structured data sources. So that's usually not a challenge.
Excellent. And for this particular customer, do you have any insights on benefits that they're achieving or expect to achieve from deploying this customer service technology?
Yeah. So when it is released to the internal, limited users, it gave some impressive performance, right? Everyone was really happy with what it is producing, right? And everyone was equally eager to go live with this. Although there are certain, the legal formalities that are going on, but what we expect, there'll be close to 40% reductions in the transfers to the live agents, right? And thus, as the live agent conversation reduces, it has a direct impact on the cost of operations, right? Also, the time to serve the passengers overall, we think that it is reducing, and it is expected to reduce by close to 40 to 50%. Currently, the customers or the passengers are going on the website, they're simply chatting there, but they're not really getting the response, so they're going out and navigating through the website. But with the AI-based, assistant there, they're going to get their responses pretty quickly, and that's where we see a 40 to 50% reduction in the, the session handling times. Both these factors actually, they are significantly responsible for increased passenger experience and increasing the CSAT, customer satisfaction there. So we're really looking forward to, all of these benefits getting delivered to the customer. And not only these, this is just a start of the use case. The next step is to extend this within the airport terminal on information kiosks, right, with voice assistant, voice enablement, etc. So it's not just the website-based assistant, but it's getting into the physical or the phygital space and having a different touch point with the customer. There is already an avatar-based agent that we have developed, which will be delivering this enhanced passenger experience on multiple channels.
Well, as a frequent traveler, Swapnil, my normal tactic to get information on an airport is to ask the person at the security line, the security guard. And half the time they're right, and half the time they're not right, and they don't give me good information. So I am very, very much looking forward to this kind of technology that can be responsive and accurate, and maybe give me some good insight, some good tips on a car wash, on a shoe shine, or on a dessert that is highly recommended behind the security line. So very much looking forward to this.
Absolutely.
So for the listeners today on the episode, contact information and information on the solution will be in the show notes. A big thank you to Swapnil and his team for joining us today for this conversation. Swapnil, any last comments that you'd like to make to the audience?
Absolutely, an exciting area, generative AI, especially the Azure OpenAI. If you use it, so many exciting projects that I'm seeing in the market. Very interesting, conversations with the customer, and so many use cases. So happy to learn from a lot of you out there. Looking forward to connecting with you again.
Excellent. And I'm very happy that Microsoft's technology was able to catch up with your dreams and your plans when you started as a young data scientist focusing on NLP. So Swapnil, thank you for your partnership. Thank you for the work that you do with us. And we certainly appreciate the conversation today, the insights, the lessons learned. A big thank you.
Thanks, James.